the studio, I mean, talk about an accidental beginning. We had a person who was developing jobs for us. He was working with 4 young men. They were drawing, like pencil drawings, pencil and paper drawings, and they were asking him questions about art. He was able to answer them because he was an artist. And he got the idea to quit his job and develop an art studio. So he came in to tell me about, I'm going to quit my job and develop an art studio for people with disabilities. I thought, well, that idea sucks. That's a terrible idea, because he was good at his job and we wanted to keep employing him, developing jobs for us. So I thought, well, this is an interesting idea, the studio thing, not thinking it would really go anywhere. We kind of worked out a deal with him to support the studio. We thought maybe 10 or 12 people, if we're lucky, might wander into the studio at some point in time. And he had some great ideas around making it a working studio from the beginning, focusing on fine art from the beginning, embedding it at the Rogue Art Gallery, and having it really be a highly integrated, really focused on fine art studio from the very beginning. Well, to our shock, the studio went from 4 people to 50 people in probably a year, 18 months, something like that. And we ended up moving it around a couple of times until we situated it. As I'm telling this story, it's on 32 South Central in Medford, but it's still keeping to the original idea. It's a fine art studio. It's not about what I can do, which is like, I don't know, glue macaroni on pieces of paper. If somebody draws something for me and I can have different colored macaroni, make a mosaic, I'd be lucky to pull that off. But yeah, just a really neat beginning. So that's what we do. 2 kinds of residential services, employment services, a studio, consultation, all aimed at helping people stay with their families, helping people stay in their community, helping people be successful in jobs in local businesses and living where they want to live, and really having a life exactly like yours and mine. The original idea for the studio was art. It was art focused and pretty much acrylic, oil, adding color to the 4 young men that were just doing pencil drawings. That was a big first start. But the idea at the very beginning was kind of an arts community or an arts center. So the thinking, even at the very beginning, was highly integrated, and what kind of stopped that was how big it got so fast. Is that we never anticipated getting that big that fast. So it would have been much easier if it was 12 people to keep it highly integrated. So that was one of the issues with it. But we always thought about, well, what about music? What about different kinds of art? What about sculpture? What about theater? We had an example of a person in Ashland who had done a summer theater for people with autism. I think it was at the very beginning when we started our studio, was doing this. And he rehearsed the play and put on the play. With all of the actors had autism, and we thought, well, geez, we could do any of that. It could be music, it could be sculpture, it could be. We just have to find the right venue. We have to have the space for it. For a while, space stopped us. I mean, when you think about music, well, it's easy to think about people bringing instruments and making music, but you got a drum kit. Where are you going to keep the drum kit? Drum kits take up a lot of space. You got a piano. Is it a real piano, an upright piano? It's got to find a home, So there were all those kind of issues to resolve. And then, of course, it's important, I think, that the things that we do as an organization, any nonprofit might make a choice to subsidize part of their organization, but from the beginning, we didn't want the studio to kind of suck money out of the rest of the organization, in effect, to keep it going. I mean, it's a fun, shiny thing, and people love it, but we wanted to make sure it could stand enough on its own to not really negatively impact the rest of the services that we provided. My friend Matt is a good example of, all of the things that we've been talking about up to this point. Matt was born in 1956. He had Down syndrome. When he was born, he couldn't go to public school. His parents got divorced when he was 10 years old. Neither one of them could take him. So they made the very difficult decision to place him in a state institution. So they placed him in a state institution in 1966. I met him when I was working for the county in about 1981 or so, and he was just walking around the grounds. He was pushing people around that were in wheelchairs, and he was almost like a staff person there. And there were a lot of people that lived in institutions in those days that could very easily have lived in community settings if that choice was available to them at that point in time. And that choice wasn't available in 1966 when Matt was placed there. So I met him, and I remember meeting him and finding out that his family lived in Jackson County. And I said, so like, hey Matt, how about moving to Jackson County and living down here? And he said, nope. He wasn't going to have any of that. And I think the reason, as I talked to him over time, the reason is that all of his friends lived at Fairview. He'd kind of become a teenager there. He'd sort of grown up. He was a young adult at that point in time. He developed some really strong friendships there. It was the place that he knew the most. So regardless of what I might think about Matt living in an institution, Matt liked living there. And there were a lot of things for him to like about it. And so I remember talking to his parents, and his parents were, I think, they were open to what Matt wanted to do. So their initial reaction was, well, these community-based services are kind of new. We're not sure about them. But, you know, if Matt wants to do that, we can make that happen. But Matt didn't want it to happen. So I made a bunch of trips back to Fairview because we were developing projects in Jackson County and taking people out of the institution at that point in time. So I went back, saw Matt several times, asked him if he wanted to move, and he just kept saying no, 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 for like 2 years. And I'd taken pictures of people that he knew living in houses in Jackson County and Ashland and Medford, and still like no. And finally, after a couple of years, he'd had enough friends move out that he thought, well, it might be okay to live near my mom and dad, you know, and my siblings and whatnot. And so he made the choice to move. And so he did. So, super fast story. Here's a guy that was in 1956, born at a time when he couldn't go to public school. Actually, couldn't have gone to public school until about 1973 because they were closed. It took a federal law to integrate public schools in 1972, 73. So he couldn't go to public school. He couldn't have got a job. Couldn't have got an apartment in a community at that point in time. Those things were unimaginable. And so he was placed in an institution, lived there for 17 years. Thought that was going to be his life for the rest of his life. Got this opportunity to move into a group home in 1983. Moved into a group home with like 9 other people on Edward Street. That was his intro to it. And got a job on a grounds crew. So those were big enough deals. But now, if you look back at Matt's life, Matt made a decision to move into an apartment in 1989. He retired from a job in the community. He's lived in an apartment from 1989 to the present. He's very independent, great Ducks fan. Nobody should hold that against him. Just a wonderful fella. And the things that he's doing today in retirement, absolutely unimaginable 30 years ago in his life. Just absolutely not imaginable. And a lot of that brought to us by a change in thinking, a change in philosophy, a change in support strategy, and changes in technology. All of that supporting his great life.